Kuwait has provided funding as well. Turkey has provided staging grounds for these guys and operating bases. Jordan provides bases, and Israel provides intelligence, air support, and medical supplies. Now, remember this map from the beginning, right? What you're going to see, this is Turkey, so you're seeing staging grounds right here. The terrorists are coming into Syria from Turkey because they're allowed into Turkey. Into Syria through Turkey. They've essentially come up through Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and are brought in from Turkey into Syria and on into Iraq. So, to give you one idea, let's see if I've got the next slide. Yeah. So, to give you an idea, just give you one example of how this works. About 2 years ago, the United States paid for and helped train terrorists that you saw on the screen in Jordan. They were brought to Jordan. They were trained by the United States on Jordanian military bases. They were brought all the way, it was paid for by Saudi Arabia and Qatar as well. They were brought into Turkey, and the terrorists were brought in from Turkey into Syria. And as the terrorists were coming into Syria, Israel bombed a couple of locations inside Syria. In other words, acted as Al-Qaeda's air force. And that shows you the level to which there's international support for the terrorists. And we'll get into why. All right, so the media, if you listen to that, will give you a number of myths about Syria. One is that Assad is a brutal dictator. The other is that Assad kills his own people. And another is that they've been fighting over there for 1,000 years. All these are untrue. That's the Syrian president, by the way, if anybody's got to look, that's Bashar al-Assad. So, the first one, Assad is a brutal dictator. Assad, when he came to power, was actually seen as a reformer, okay? He improved the conditions in Syria, improved civil liberties, and there's never been any credible evidence that Assad has intentionally killed civilians. All right? Despite what the media says. The media, if anybody is killed in Syria, will tell you that they were killed by Assad. Not true. He's made every effort to protect the minorities in Syria. And it's not just Muslims there, right? They've got Jews, they've got Christians, they've got Druze, all that stuff. He's made every effort to protect them, right? So, the other myth. They've been fighting over there for 1,000 years. And we're talking about Syria. The truth is that Syria was a peaceful country before the destabilization took place. There was no civil war. There was no tension between Jews and Christians and Muslims. These people lived in relative peace here. The idea that radical Islam was a part of Syria, radical Islam was not seen in Syria. It was not a part of Syrian life, but prior to the last 4 years. Again, the religions lived in relative peace. Go on here. So, we've got to look at who controls Al-Qaeda. What is Al-Qaeda? Who controls terrorism in general? Al-Qaeda, the history of that, it was created in the 1970s, and it was created by the United States. It was created by Zbigniew Brzezinski. I think I have this gentleman's picture. There we go. That's Zbigniew. He was the former National Security Director under Jimmy Carter. He's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations Trilateral Commission. He wrote 2 books, Between Two Ages and the Grand Chessboard, where he advocated for a technocratic society. In other words, he wanted to have a dictatorship of elite scientific controllers. He advocated for the destruction of Russia. He's now an advisor to Obama. He created, again, Al-Qaeda in the 1970s in order to draw Russia in to Afghanistan. There he is, with the Mujahideen, which became Al-Qaeda. He says, I'd do it again. There he is again. The United States, throughout the 1980s, used Al-Qaeda, which was under its control, to fight Russia. This is a matter of historical record. They also used Al-Qaeda in order to try to assassinate Gaddafi in the 90s, because he stood as an enemy to the U.S. imperialist ideas. So there's also, this wasn't Muslim fundamentalism, but this was death squads, nevertheless, that were used in Central and South America in order to overthrow the governments down there. In 1993, there was an attack in the World Trade Center, right? That plot was controlled by the FBI, and you can see that on record. Ahmed Salam was the FBI informant that blew the whistle on that. But the plot was controlled by the FBI, and Al-Qaeda was used in order to carry that out. And of course, we've got 9/11. Now, Al-Qaeda was used on 9/11, and I'm sorry, if anybody thinks that 19 Arab Muslim hijackers flew planes into buildings and that's what caused the collapse, I'm sorry, you need to do some research. The fires were not hot enough to melt the steel or weaken the steel. Building 7 collapsed with no plane into it. 7 of the hijackers are still alive. Explain that. But that's another talk for another time. So those are the things I just listed, and moving on here as quickly as possible. When we invaded Iraq, Iraqi opposition was largely united against the United States. They were Sunni, Shiite, whatever. They were all united against the United States. What the United States did was funded death squads to go in and attack Shiites and then attack Sunnis and blame it on each other, right? So they got to the point where they were fighting each other. Sunnis and Shiites, armed gangs, armed militias fighting one another. They couldn't stand one another, and they couldn't unite to fight the United States. So that was a success for the U.S. And then in 2011, the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group was used to overthrow Gaddafi in Libya. And this was a terrorist organization. It was openly part of Al-Qaeda. The Libyan rebels, after they seized power, after they took over the country, and after they turned it into a fundamentalist police state, they began beheading people there. And also after they killed Gaddafi, they essentially caught Gaddafi, who's 72 in this picture here. They beat him within an inch of his life. Watch this on YouTube if you like. Beat him within an inch of his life, and then shoved a sword up his rear end, right, while he's still alive. And they shot him in the head. This is literally the last 30 seconds of Gaddafi's life. So, again, after they took power and began implementing this fundamentalist police state, they engaged in massacres. All of this with the sanctioning of the U.S. government. If you can remember the Libyan situation, you'll remember the U.S. government, including the president, saying that it's good that Gaddafi was overthrown and that the rebels were freedom fighters. When they took power, they slaughtered black Libyans. Thousands of black Libyans were systematically slaughtered. This guy's been arrested, he's got a gun to his head, and the only crime he's committed is just being black in Libya, which is in Africa. Same thing with these guys, right? These are our freedom fighters. It's another guy, Libya, committed no crime. They were rounded up and put into camps, and into prison camps, concentration camps essentially. They were slaughtered wholesale, or they went into villages and killed them, all of them, and then spray painted the Arabic word for slave on their villages. Those are the freedom fighters that the United States supports. So after that little escapade, the Al-Qaeda fighters were used again in Syria, as I said, starting in 2010 and on up, to overthrow Bashar al-Assad in Syria. So we are going to start again. So how these terrorist and fake revolutions are used. There's really two ways. There's a false flag option and the proxy army option. False flag option is kind of what you see on 9/11 in Oklahoma City, Sandy Hook, yeah, but that wasn't Islamic fundamentalism. Essentially, you use a terrorist group to commit an act, you blame the terrorist group and use that as a justification to do something, i.e. Iraq, or the Patriot Act, or something like that, Afghanistan, you name it. Or you can use the proxy armies. That's the method of Brzezinski that I showed earlier. This is the idea of forming these terrorists into fighting brigades and using them as if they were a military force. So your military doesn't have to go in and do it, but you send these guys in to do it for you. There's also something called the color revolution. This is where you create a mass protest movement that's controlled from the top. It seems like it's organic. You've got hundreds of thousands and millions of people out in the streets, but it's actually controlled from the top. They call that swarming adolescence because they always get young people, they get college students, generally college students, they get people who are unemployed, don't have anything to look forward to, and that sort of thing. And they use them as a battering ram. Sometimes they pay them. They can do things like overthrow a government, install a puppet regime, or they can just advocate for some type of law or something that they want to get passed. Again, it's all controlled from the top. It's using the force of the people to get something across. So, overthrowing governments that resist the will of the U.S. And again, this doesn't just apply to the United States, it applies to NATO and all as well. So, the foreign influence, geopolitics, imperialism, corporations, banks, all of this stuff. This is why the United States organizes Al-Qaeda. This is why they organize color revolutions. Another reason is a pipeline, the oil pipeline. This keeps coming up in the Middle East, right? Assad, the president of Syria, refused to engage in an agreement with one of the U.S.'s allies for a pipeline, and he actually continued to work with Russia. The U.S. doesn't want to work with Russia because if Russia can provide gas to Europe, which is what he would do, what they would do if Syria's pipeline with Russia went through, then that allows Russia a backup method of supplying that gas to Russia as opposed to Europe, as opposed to the pipeline that goes through Europe. It's all geopolitics. We don't have time to go into that. The Syrian Central Bank is government-owned. It's not privately owned like ours. Syria generally rejects Western imperialism into its country.
Is the bank still owned by Syria?
It still is. Still is right now. A weak Syria benefits Israel, the United States ally. Syria is a stepping stone to Iran, which is another big target of the United States, still on the list. And Syria is a close ally of Russia. Now, create confrontation between the United States, NATO, the European Union, and Russia and China. So why would they do this? You've got situations like Ukraine. I don't know if everybody's heard about that. Borders Russia. The United States initiated that as well. But Anne-Marie Slaughter, who works in the State Department, says we should hit Russia and Syria, well, hit Russia, that should be in Syria, where he is weakest. So in other words, attacking Syria is a way to hurt Russia. Now, that's very dangerous because Russia has as many nuclear weapons as we do. And they're not weak and they're not afraid of the United States. You don't want to pick a fight with Russia. Again, as I said, Russia is the ultimate goal here because it's the last major country that could withstand global Western imperialism. So there is a goal of creating a confrontation between world powers, essentially World War III, because this would not be fought in the Middle East somewhere, or in Africa, or in Asia. This would be fought here, and in Europe, and in Russia. This would be fought all over the world. So the goal here is to create this confrontation, and out of all this fighting, out of the ashes of the system that we had, which it will be ashes if we engage in thermonuclear warfare, the idea is to build a new system, right? Order out of chaos, and you see on your dollar bill you have e pluribus unum, which means out of many, one. You also have on your dollar bill novus ordo seclorum, which means New World Order, right? The idea is to break all of these systems down and reform them into one. And you're talking about one authority here. So, what are the solutions? You can either organize politically to avoid this confrontation with Russia, which means you oppose wars over Ukraine, you oppose wars in the Middle East, you oppose all imperialist wars. I don't care where they are at. If you're not defending your country from an attack, then you should stay home. And there's nothing honorable about going over and slaughtering people who've done absolutely nothing to you. That's not a badge of honor. So you organize politically to avoid this continued war in the Middle East. Again, you demand that we stop funding the terrorists. You want to stop terrorism. It's not about destroying civil liberties. It's not about bombing Syria, for God's sake. It's about telling the State Department to stop funding it and to stop directing it. So, again, refuse to participate, support, or fight in these foreign wars. And you go on the offensive politically. It's not enough to just simply say, we don't like the current situation, and that's it. You've got to have a plan, right? And talk eventually about what those plans are. So your options, actually I forgot to put this in there. See? Some of the demands, an immediate halt to funding, training, and arming of terrorist organizations in the Middle East and North Africa. An immediate demand to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, and Turkey to stop funding the terrorists, and of course the United States to stop funding the terrorists. And you can work with existing governments like Assad in Syria, like Abadi in Iraq, Hezbollah in Lebanon, to eliminate the rebels and ISIS and move forward from there. So you create this new era of cooperation, economic development, and so forth with the Middle East. In other words, if you're going to get out and protest, as I said, it's not enough to just say you don't like it. What's your solution? Well, here's some solutions. Here's some demands. You can't demand something if you don't know what you're demanding, and that's your choice. Right? You can get active, or you can let this play out. We can all see that one morning. So that's my information, and I think I'm about an hour, so I'll stop.
I got one question here. If they, I believe this right here, if they stop that funding, everybody would go home.
They would. Most of them would. They would have no reason to do anything else.
If the West is the West corporate bad. Other than the nuclear weapons in Russia and the nuclear weapons here, the West is the back, corporation. And what's the big deal with Russia? Like, why did they need that last little Russia?
Well, on one level, the idea is that Russia, it's a huge country, right? So it's got influence globally in other places. So it's not going to lay down like a smaller country in Eastern Europe would or so forth. So it's the last example of where a powerful country can exist for West itself.
And they were just enough to take down every corporation everywhere but Russia.
Remains to be seen. But I don't think that Russia entirely wants to exist. So we'll see how that plays out.
Great. Charlie, get over here, girl.
So with false flag acts like 9/11, the government has some type of control over terrible events like that.
Yeah, well, essentially, the terrorist groups are entirely under the control of the West, entirely under the control of the U.S. State Department, for instance. That's on record. They said they were Brzezinski created them, and they've never left control of them. They've used them ever since. Well, against Gaddafi, they're actually using them against Russia repeatedly, and President Chechnya. So they have entire control of these groups. Now, once you have 100,000 fighters on the ground in Syria or Iraq. Occasionally, some of those guys are going to go off the reservation. But as far as top-down control, that Baghdadi guy with the Rolex that I showed is well known to be a CIA asset.
I got a question. Who's in favor of the big countries, the big dogs, in favor of the New World Order?
I would say all of them, or mostly all of them. There are people like Gaddafi in Libya and Syria, Assad. They tend to resist certain aspects of it, and when they do, they get bombed or they get destroyed. But I don't really look at any country, even Russia, even though it's been put up as the opposite of the U.S., I don't really even look at Russia as the main opposition, because there's the terms problem, reaction, solution. Right? You create the problem, the reaction, the problem.
It's bad for the United States, won't it?
It'll be bad for everybody, yeah.
Okay.
So I honestly think this is entirely designed to go the direction of the nuclear bomb. But, hopefully we can stop it. All right. I think we're done.
Y'all gonna let them go that fast?
Maybe I should say that.
Huh? Is that good? Good.
Everybody understands it?
Hey, look here. I tell you what, United States got something. I'm gonna say it the right way. They got some bad stuff in there.
Yeah.
They the one that create the problem.
And we've done it for years.
Hey, people get kind of offensive about, touching on certain things. Like for me, it was exciting for me, not that anyone got offended, but the fact that, that's the starting of a dialogue for me. Because that's my buddy too. And you my brother. So eventually, maybe one day maybe the express book. Some people just have their way, some people don't, but maybe we'll be able to talk. But it's awesome. I don't have a lot to say, I'm learning about this,
But you know what?
Very good for me.
There's no way in the world a plane could cause them buildings to drop like that. That's impossible.
It is.
Impossible.
It's physically impossible for that to happen.
But in
That never gonna
93,
work like that.
but do you remember in 93 when they tried it and they tried to blow it up from the lower level? The next week they were on the news telling you how to blow it up from the top part.
Well, the idea is that they're telling you that jet fuel from the plane melted the steel beams or weakened the steel beams. The jet fuel can't get hot enough for it to do that. So he's right. It's physically impossible for that to happen.
And that's right. That thing flattened out. That was planned. They had all that stuff together. Somebody planned that. It was strategically designed.
It was explosives that were planted in there. It was controlled demolition. Hey, I guess we're done. Everybody's free to move now.
Once again, thank you, everybody, for coming to coffee, etc. In the beginning, I thanked everybody. A few people walked in. You walked in. I didn't get you, the lady's name.
From Sumner.
Sumner?
With my sister Kaylee.
All right. You guys are from where?
I work with Brandon.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. That's
We live
great.
in Darlington, so we travel.
Have you been to Misty's?
Great.
I love Missy.
Oh, great.
She's my best friend.
We want to go.
Oh, Misty's? The restaurant.
Oh, that's where my friend is staying.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry. I know this Missy. I was like, she lives in the area.
We got to leave that out too.
It's all right.
The patio.
Right.